Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Phoenix, Arizona, it's time for Phoenix Business Radio, spotlighting the city's best businesses and the people who lead them.
Welcome, everyone, to Project Management Office Hours. We are the #1 live project management radio show in the U.S., broadcasting to you from the Phoenix Business RadioX studios in Tempe, Arizona. Although today, we are working remote. We have guests joining us from the UK. I'm working out of the home office, and our team is working out of the studio in Tempe. I'm your host, PMO Joe, and for the next hour, we'll be talking project management. Before we get into the show, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, the PMO Squad. They're working right now to set up some free programs to assist businesses dealing with the current coronavirus pandemic we're dealing with. And these programs are going to be able to help businesses and individuals during these times. Be sure to review their website and newsletters for update. You can visit www.thepmosquad.com to get more information in the coming days. And now we're going to jump into the show. So I'm really excited to have with us, joining us from the UK, our special guest, Susanne Madsen. Welcome, Susan.
Yeah, sure. I am currently dialing in from my home office in London, and pandemic or not, this is probably where I would be sitting either way. I have been managing projects and programs for between 20 and 25 years. It makes me feel old and sound old, but for the last 7 years, I have been running more leadership programs. I've been coaching project managers full-time, so really swapped to more of a coaching, leadership coaching role. Yeah, that's kind of a very brief introduction.
Yes, well, thank you so much for joining us. And again, it's great to be able to have an international guest with us this week so that we do get an international perspective to what's happening with the pandemic. Of course, here in the U.S., we have been hit now over 200,000 cases positive and 5,000 plus deaths that have come from this. And the UK has unfortunately been hit pretty hard as well. As you and I talked a month or so ago, you had mentioned one of the things in your coaching that you help with is project managers dealing with stress. And certainly we're confronted with this now. How has this affected you personally and professionally?
So actually, I've been very much impacted because I do some coaching from home. So I use Skype normally or Zoom, and that's kind of a smaller part of what I do, I would say, and that's not been impacted. But I run an enormous amount of leadership training programs, project management trainings, and I travel extensively, and all of that has been postponed. They're all very careful to say it hasn't been cancelled, but effectively it has, because they book me several times a year. So I was actually due to go to Venice about, I don't know if it's 3 or 4 weeks ago now, but it was just when, I don't know if you guys knew, but they canceled the Venice Carnival in the last couple of days. And I was due to go that week. And actually my suitcase was packed, and my parents texted me and said, "Are you not due to go to Venice this week?"
Oh, wow.
And I was like, yep. Why do you ask? Well, we worry about the virus. I said, virus? That's only in China, isn't it?
Yeah.
And they said, are you not watching the news? And I wasn't. And basically, I got hold of my client. So this was, I'm running project management training for Electrolux globally. So don't know if you guys are familiar with Electrolux.
Yeah. Absolutely.
This is a plant. The plant I go to, they used to produce 10,000 washing machines a day, and I've been into their production unit. It's absolutely fascinating. Now they've outsourced some of that to Romania, but they still do about 5,000 to 6,000 washing machines a day. So it's mainly engineers down there I train. Anyhow, my trip got cancelled. After that, my trip to Holland, the leadership program I'm running in Holland, everything has been postponed and put on hold. I was due to go to Slovenia to speak for the PMI. And I was due to, for the PMI, we were going to do a conference plus workshops. The conference, the PMI changed that within 10 days. They changed it from being a live conference to an online conference. You know, PMI are run by volunteers. They'd never done this before. It was really, really well done. And we did it all via, different types. We recorded via Zoom. They used YouTube Live Link to broadcast it. Mm-hmm. And yesterday, my workshop was moved to yesterday. It was about stress management. And for the first time ever, I did a 2.5-hour workshop online because Zoom has this ability to do breakout rooms.
Yeah.
So that's what's happened on my side. So up until now, I would say I've been busy rearranging stuff. And from now on, there's just like this emptiness in my diary, which is both fascinating, interesting, and very unusual.
Well, and I guess that unusualness and the unknown, right? Because we don't know how this will wind down, when this will wind down. And of course, that impacts all of us, right? I mean, you're drawing your income from these trips and all of that. So it adds additional stress. And you're comfortable working from home, but not everybody is. A lot of people are used to going in the office. So do you have any tips or tricks or what works for you that maybe you could share with others who aren't as comfortable working from home?
Well, there's some practicalities and there's some physicalities, and then there is the whole mind, what we're thinking in our minds. So first of all, I know that some people are sharing workspaces with their spouses and they're not set up for that. And that's obviously very tricky. At the same time, they have to look after their kids. And yesterday on the workshop I was running, some of the participants, we could see their kids around them. They were on mute, but their kids were wanted to be with their parents. And I think it's okay because it's almost happening to everybody. I was coaching one of my clients today and she's like, I'm not as effective as I used to be because I have to keep an eye on my 2 boys. And it's okay. We can't hold ourselves to the same standards. I'm very sorry, but we can't. Not if our working environment has changed so dramatically. I'm very fortunate. I have my home office set up. As you rightly said, I'm comfortable here. But for people who are not so comfortable, I think, first of all, they have to accept that things are changing. And if they have to look after their kids or if they have to share their workspace, the sooner they accept it and stop beating themselves up. So I think that's the first thing. Obviously, they can try to arrange themselves to make it more comfortable. But I think what's more interesting is what's happening in our minds. Because we can come up with a lot of limiting beliefs or anxiety about what's happening or focusing on what's going wrong. And I've actually heard that the divorce rates in New York City is up by 50% already. And in China, they're up by 30%. I have no idea if that's true. Don't quote me on it. But it says something about the stress that people are under and getting closer together.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Just from my own personal experience, we have 4 children, and they're here in Arizona. They closed the schools for the year, so they have to do distance learning. So they're still in school, but they're doing it from home. And I had to let everybody know, hey, I'm about to go on my radio show, and I have 4 dogs in the house. So can everybody keep the dogs quiet? Can the kids stay off the internet for the next hour to make sure I've got good bandwidth? And again, I have an office as well, so I'm isolated. I don't have to worry about them coming in to bother me. But that's stuff we didn't have to worry about before. And then we get inundated with the numbers, the counts, how many cases, how many deaths, where it's spreading to different countries. So I started each morning now going on a walk without looking at my phone so that at least I know I'm not waking up to numbers that are going to impact my day and increase the stress and anxiety. And that's really helped. It's been a lot of help. What else do you have out there in your toolbox maybe to help other techniques for people to help with that anxiety or that stress to try to overcome that?
Yeah, so I think we project managers are very aware, I think, of risk management techniques.
Yeah.
And risk management techniques quite fairly logical. So it's about what's the likelihood of something happening and what's the impact in case it happens. And I don't mean to go all processy on something here, but I think we can use it because the likelihood of something happening to us is probably still quite low if we stay at home, stay safe, and take the precautions. I think what is important with risk management techniques and why I mention it is because with risk management, we focus on what we can do to minimize the risk. And after that, we have to accept it. what can you do to minimize the risk of getting a virus, for instance? Well, we know what the advice is, right? Stay at home, wash your hands, protect yourself.
Yeah.
And after that, I think we have to trust that we have done what we can do. And as you're saying, not watch all the death number, the number of deaths, and not watch the news excessively, because it's only adding to the anxiety. So instead, try to focus on what we can do. So I've done everything I can to minimize the risk of this happening to me. What can I now focus on? What's the opportunity that's opening up to me?
Mm-hmm.
The people I coach, they're in a different situation. Some people are very, very busy at the moment because they're busy firefighting, because they're busy changing their projects around, changing funding around. And so there's a little bit of crisis management. Other people are not so busy. And their mind, there's even more scope now for their mind to go off and worry. And this is where I think it's really important. What is the opportunity to you? There's always opportunities. As we even know, every risk has a threat and an opportunity. What do we choose to focus on? So for me personally, I think the opportunities are slowing down. A friend of mine in Amsterdam, where they're all working from home now, looking after their 4-year-old. In spite of it being very challenging, she said to me, but after all, there's more slow living now. Slow living, I love it.
Yeah.
So for me, I do exactly like you. I get out in the morning. We've been very blessed with amazing weather. In London for the last 2 weeks is very unusual. No traffic is very unusual. No planes. I've never, ever experienced it. What an opportunity. I go out in the morning and then I focus on doing more meditation. I was secretly hoping that I could slow down a little bit, because I've been traveling a lot, sometimes it's every week.
Yeah.
So the opportunity is to review, stop, evaluate, look inwards, breathe, deep breathing. And I think for so many people, we forget that breath is right there with us, and tapping into it and feeling, focusing on how calm we can be when we really focus inwards.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, the slowing down piece of it. And it makes me think, again, I'm home with 4 kids, and in their mind, they don't understand. It's almost like they're on summer break, and I have to explain to them, no, you're still in school, but you're not in school all day like you would be. You're here. So what if we played a card game? What if we turned PE class into cleaning the garage, or something where we're actually working together? I have usually the majority of my day is away from my family. So now I have an opportunity, albeit the situation is horrible, but I'm with my family, and to take that opportunity to spend more time, I think can take our mind away from some of the bad that's going and focus on the positive. Like you said, let's think of the opportunity as opposed to threat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, we jumped into this conversation, I guess, because it's just so present in everybody's life today. But I didn't really get a chance to ask you about you and your story. How did you actually get to where you're at today? What is the Susanne Madsen story that brought us to this conversation?
Right. So let me try not to go back too far, but actually, perhaps it is relevant to say that I am actually Danish. And I have lived in England for 20 years. And I've been a project manager for all of those years. In the beginning, it was consulting. Then I started working in finance, always as a project and program manager. And let's just go back like about 10 years to the last financial crisis. Just before 2006, 2008, I was running the biggest program for the investment bank where I was working. And it was unbelievably stressful, talking about stress. But I was very lucky. Towards the end of the program, actually, I went on a leadership course. It was a 5-day residential course. And will you believe it? It took place the same week as the Lehman Brothers went bust. I think it was early September 2008. Oh. I remember it very clearly because we had stress like we have stress today.
I can only imagine.
And everything collapsed. The banks collapsed, and nobody knew what was going to happen. But what I remember from that leadership course was that it was the first time I was coached. It was such an unbelievably powerful experience to me, because I came to this coaching conversation, which was just 1 hour long, with, I'm stressed, help me out, what should I do? And the person who was coaching me did nothing but ask me some insightful questions that really made me reflect. And at the end of the 1 hour, I had a complete aha moment, which has carried me through to today, actually, because that aha moment wasn't that I knew exactly what to do or how to manage my overwhelm. It was more a deep feeling of, wow, I can change something. And what I realized was, if I decide to go home at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, I can do it. It's only my mind holding me back. It's all in my mind. And that was this mind-boggling, very empowering thought that came up in me. So I left this 5-day leadership course feeling very empowered with a couple of insights. Number one, project managers need leadership. Number two, coaching is magical. And I went off, I enrolled myself in a free 2-day weekend course. At the end of the course, I'd spent £5,000 signing up to the whole program, which is probably what, $7,000 or something like that.
Right about that, yeah.
And I thought I'd been brainwashed. I was very worried. But as it turned out, it was one of the best decisions. So I became a coach. I started coaching my fellow project managers in the bank. And whilst I was still doing my day job. So I had this test bed. I could use the meeting rooms to coach. And little by little, one step after the other, I began to write my first book because the people I was coaching, they were like, can you not put this down somehow, write it? You know, you're asking so many questions. Can I not get it in a different format? So everything grew from that, really.
Well, it's I think part of your story, I think we can all relate to, right? Dealing with the stresses of projects and trying to find relief of how to overcome that. And then having an aha moment in your career that then you change. For me, similar about 7 years ago, was tired of corporate America, not because of what I was doing, but I always had organizational leaders who didn't really understand project management. So it was always a fight to try to get the type of support that we needed to be able to execute on projects which they approved, right? We were just executing for what they approved, but they wouldn't give us the support we need. And we'd always request for us to bring in consultants to help us. And I was like, why do you want us to bring in a consultant? You have a team right here that's willing to help. And it was one of those sessions where I had the aha moment of, why am I not one of these consultants? My own organization is willing to pay more money to bring in an outside perspective rather than listening to our internal perspective. It's time for me to leave corporate America and go work with organizations who want to value the experience that we have. So not the same story as yours, but a similar aha moment brings me to a career change. And then you go along with that and you see where it brings you. And now you have a radio show, right? I mean, the unknown things happen.
And that makes me very curious to ask you, Joe, because when you make such a change, surely there must have been some fear as well, because I had some fears. You've had this corporate paycheck for a long time. And I know how I overcame my fear. How did you overcome your fear, if you had one, of this newness and earning money doing your new, being a consultant?
Yeah, I mean, it was full of fear. I was the sole provider for our family. My wife was a stay-at-home mom. Again, we had 4 children, so some of them were still rather young at the time. And the first way I overcame the fear, before I even started the gig, as a consultant, was getting my wife's buy-in that she was okay to take the journey with me. So I didn't have to wonder, if I fail, how is my spouse going to react to this? And her message to me was simple. She said, Joe, just don't fail. Right? I mean, she kind of put it in simplest terms as, you've always been successful at what you've done. You've been able to climb the corporate ladder. You were a successful athlete before you did all of that. Everything you've done, you've gone in fully committed to be successful. So just go in with that mindset, and I trust you. I support you. We're going to make that work. And so getting her to say that before I started helped alleviate some of the stresses.
Wonderful.
But then as you take on employees, I started out as an individual, but then when you take on employees, now it's a bigger stress because, periods that we're in right now, you have to worry about, how am I going to support those other families? How are we going to make sure that they're taken care of, right? That we're treating them the right way. sometimes you can't do that, and that creates a different stress, right? Then beyond just the project, it's the organizational stress you have to deal with. From you and your perspective, as you've dealt with this, you said you've written some books on this. I mean, what are we want people to go buy those books, of course, but what are some nuggets that you can share with them that are a bit of a teaser that would want us to go out there and learn more what you have in that book, or books rather?
Yeah, so I think that obviously there's a lot of literature out there on project management, and the book doesn't really compete on that market. It's not a process book. So my second book, which is the one I'm most proud of, The Power of Project Leadership, actually, I've just been told yesterday that they've sold the rights to Polish now. So it's gonna be translated into Polish.
Oh, wow. I mean, it's my heritage. Maybe somebody in my family can pick up that copy and benefit.
Oh, it's already in Chinese. So there's a first edition that was translated into Chinese. Now they've bought the right to translate it again, the second edition, into Chinese. So that's all very interesting. So the book is, I think, quite separately about leadership in projects. So there's a lot of leadership books out there about corporate leadership and leading a department, but that's not a project. So the book really is about how do I do that? How do I lead my team? How do I lead my stakeholders? How do I have challenging conversations? How do I lead with what I call lead with vision? So how do I inspire the team to follow? There's also something else about managing my time, looking inwards. What about being authentic? That's one of the 7 keys I have in there. So in the book really tries to cover the full spectrum from looking inwards, managing myself and my time and my stress, to leading others. And one of the 7 keys actually is on tools, on powerful techniques, because we need those. Even in leadership, there's a space for the management, but only a space. We need just enough process. And after that, it's all about the people. So, sorry, go on.
I was going to say, one of our guests we had on, I guess it was a year or two ago, Laura Bernard, she had talked about how she's trying to make this push at one point to change our titles even, right? Stop calling us project managers, call us project leaders. And the importance of doing that, because we're not managing a project. It's people, right? We're leading people to execute a project, right? And I think that speaks well to what you were just describing.
I would say some people do that.
Yeah.
But not everyone. So the top 3 mistakes that I write about in the book is, number 1, we put tasks over people. So many people are very task oriented, and when things need to be delivered, they look down instead of looking up and out. And when there's a crisis or something to be done, they look down at their computer. They don't look up and out at the people who need information. I think a lot of project managers are quite task oriented, and rightly so. They have focus on the goal and what needs to be delivered. But they could do with a bit more focus generally, okay, we're generalizing here, on the people side. And so that's really the gap I'm trying to bridge there.
Yeah, and I think, it goes back to, again, conversation we had with Ruth Pierce and several others we've had on the show, but Ruth talks about strengths within our team members. And understanding, again, that, yes, we have to execute tasks to be able to deliver the project, but the people are the ones delivering those. And how do we work with our teammates to understand their strengths? Because if we communicate the same way with each team member, we're probably going to be missing out on how to appropriately work with them. And, it makes me think, again, you mentioned all the things that got canceled. Ruth Pierce was on her way out here to Arizona. We were going to be having the Arizona State University Project Management Summit. And then I was going to be heading to Boston University in June to be speaking there with Rich Maltzman, another guest we've had on the show. So all of us are, we're trying to get out there and help and provide education and guidance and leadership to folks. But this darn virus is getting in the way of everything.
Yeah, and I'm very familiar both with Rich and Ruth. They're great. They're great colleagues, I would say.
Yeah.
And I have her book, The Strength Finder, actually with me. I totally agree to what she says also. You know, we need to focus more on people. One of the things that I observe when I coach and when I train in this topic is on the project managers who are on point, on the topic. They like to talk about what needs to get delivered. Well, obviously, right? It's the tasks that need to be done. It's the what steps we need to take to get there. It is the requirements, all of that stuff that we need to talk about. But they're not very good at talking about behaviors or, God forbid, feelings. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I try a lot to get people to do is to do all the task stuff, because we need to do it. But in addition to that, talk about what we expect from each other. And this also actually comes back to stress, because it comes back to everything. But let's take stress as an example, because we've been talking about that. One thing I often say to people with stress is you need to set your own ground rules. You need to set your own boundaries. You've got to understand what you say yes to, what you say no to, what times you want to work, what time do you close your laptop, during which times do you check your email, etc. Everybody's got to have their own ground rules. But what's also interesting is setting those ground rules with the team. What kind of culture do we want? Yeah, we know that we're going to deliver X, Y, Z, but what kind of culture do we want? How do we pick up on each other's stress levels? What do we do when we see somebody struggling? What time is it acceptable for us to send and respond to emails? If you send me an email by 9 p.m., am I expected to answer it? If you call me at 7, am I expected to go on a conference call at 7 a.m. in the morning? I know that the Americans do it sometimes because of Europe, but here we don't, it shouldn't be done in Europe. So having those conversations about what we expect from each other and how we are feeling about the project, all of that good stuff is not easy for people to articulate. I'm curious what your experiences are.
Yeah, I think you've touched on a lot of key points there. And I also would add into that, rewarding people when they do the behaviors we've set that are our standard, having reward systems in place. So I remember a big project that we were doing with a client. We allowed the team to select a team member of the week, the person who contributed. And it wasn't the project leader who was doing it. It was somebody within the team. And whoever won the award for being the best contributor that week, they would nominate the person the next week. So it was a continuous process of reward systems within the team and not coming from leadership. So we had an opportunity to congratulate each other and take a moment out of the stress and have a celebration of what we were doing well. And it was all based on the criteria we had set up, right? How would we communicate? How would we get work done? So oftentimes the leader would select somebody who may have been behind on a task. It wasn't based on you were able to execute your tasks on time. It was who showed the right team spirit, who encouraged somebody, who was a person that was willing to go above and beyond what their own work may have been. And getting those opportunities for the teammates to be able to interact in that way allowed the team to be able to show some of that strength, right? The collective of the team and lift each other up, as opposed to the constant measurements of how well are we doing to schedule and to budget.
It reminds me of something I heard this week, and I think it touches, going a little bit off topic, but not really, of how we keep the team motivated now that they are in different locations. Some teams obviously have been working remotely for a while, so it's they're used to it. But still, it begs the question, how do we, especially if we're not used to it, keep people connected with each other, not physically connected, like not technically connected, but kind of more emotionally connected. And what I heard, well, let me first share with you what I did many years ago to work with remote teams. So I was obviously located in London. I had a team, I think 3 different locations in India, and a team in Belfast in Northern Ireland. So what I asked everybody, and I think we were about over 20 people across those locations. And I asked everybody to send me a picture of themselves and a little blurb about what they were doing in their spare time, strictly only in their spare time. And these were people who had never met in person. And I put together a PowerPoint presentation just with, let's say, 3 people per slide, picture and what they like to do in their spare time. And it became such a talking point because it turned out that we had 2 people who wanted to cross the Atlantic. We had several people who'd done skydiving, and we had one person who could play 21 instruments.
Oh, wow.
And, I still remember today, 10 years later, because it was funny, it was interesting, and it was personal. And we gave it to our business sponsor because she kept saying, why do we need all those developers in India? Can't you just cut some of them? She had no relationship. She hadn't seen a picture of them. So that was what I used to do. But I heard another tip this week on a call. And what the person said was, he'd asked everybody from his team to share a picture, any picture, could be anything. So on a call, one person at a time, so one call, it would be one person, next call, it would be another person. So they did a rotation. And the person could talk about whatever they wanted. And I remember they expected this person who was an ex-army officer to talk about his days in the army, but he didn't. He showed a picture of his wife and he talked about how they met or whatever. And the idea is that people connect with something that's personal and you reach out to others, you share something. I've read a lot about high-performing teams. And one of the differences between a high-performing team and a not-so-high-performing team, there are many differences, but one of them is that in a high-performing team, we care about each other's goals, not just work goals, but personal goals. So if you want to run a marathon, I'm interested in that. The team might set up a way to track your progress towards the marathon. If you want to lose weight, and I think that's so wonderful is when people really connect and they have those common, they're interested in each other and track personal goals. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, I relate to that. That's why we created within the PMO squad, right? We created our signature product, the purpose-driven PMO. And that's to bring the organization and the team members together to a common purpose, right? Because so often we get focused on executing projects, and the projects, of course, there's a purpose to doing the project, but the project is usually a symptom or a fix for what the underlying purpose may be. I tell this story when I go talk often about a organization that produces heart stents that go into your heart. And the leaders of that organization were concerned because their production had kind of plateaued. They weren't getting the same output, the growth and output that they wanted to. So they brought in a consulting firm to work with them, paid a large amount of money to bring the consultants in. And at the end of 2 months worth of work, they asked the consultants, what's your solution? How are we going to be able to get on an upward slope again? And the advice of the consultants were, we want you to create 2 posters. We want to have a poster at the entrance where your employees walk in and a poster in your break room where everybody sits and has their lunch. And they said, well, we paid you all of this money for 2 posters. Why are you giving us that? And he said, because people forgot why they're producing the heart stents. Mm-hmm. What you haven't asked me is what's on the poster. And they said, okay, well, Bite, what do you want us to put on the poster? Thinking it's going to be some slogan or something. And I said, simply, we want you to go out and take pictures of people who have received your heart stent mm-hmm. and it saved their life.
Yeah.
And we'll take it one step further. Have any of your employees received a heart stent that helped save their life? And we want you to put those pictures up. And every day when people enter and leave and when they have lunch or their break, they're going to be remembered what the purpose is of this company. It's to save lives. It's not to produce heart stents.
Yeah.
And that's what we do with the PMO, right? What is it, the purpose of why we're doing these things? So to your point, when we connect as people, we identify purpose, right? I've run 5 marathons. You look at me today, you wouldn't know that, of course, because I'm out of shape. But I've run each of those marathons to raise money for a charity. Because I know if I didn't have a purpose of why to go run that marathon, I would never go run 26 miles and do the work necessary to go train for it. But when we attach ourselves to a purpose, we can do more than we ever dreamed we could achieve, because we're now trying to accomplish a goal greater than ourselves. And that's what we do when we connect with teammates.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so pleased you brought that up, because it's right in the heart of leadership.
Yeah.
Why are we doing something? Not
That's
just
right.
what we're doing. I in my book I often talk about the 6 human needs. This is actually an Anthony Robbins. He talks a lot about the 6 human needs, and there's certainty, variety, growth, contribution, and connection is one of them, and also significance. Obviously, we can go into them, but the growth and contribution are the ones that we need to get to as leaders to really tap into that real drive in our team members. People want to feel that they're growing, that they're learning, that they're moving forward. That's why some people will go and volunteer, even if they don't get a salary for it, because they're growing, they're learning. And people want to feel that they're contributing to something that's bigger than themselves. And I think when you see images of users using what you produced in any field, then you're feeling that you're contributing. And the interesting thing about finance is that finance, especially after the financial crisis, it was a really bad word. If you were a banker, you were really evil. And I must say, I've never been a banker. I was working in technology and finance. That's how bad the image is, right?
Sure.
But people forget that even finance, even bankers, if you're doing your job well, you're really contributing. You're contributing to small businesses, opening up their, the businesses and their dreams, and making everything come true. It makes the world go around. So reminding people exactly of that, the purpose, what they're contributing to, is so important, really important. And too many people look down. They look at the tasks and the output instead of why we're doing it.
Yeah, we helped a company recently. They purchase homes, redo those homes, and then offer them not for resale, but for people to rent who previously could only rent an apartment, and they've never been able to own, or rather rent a home. And I interviewed 32 different people within their organization, and I asked all of them, several questions which were consistent regardless of their role. And I asked them, why does your company exist? And only one person said to provide safety to people who previously felt unsafe where they lived. And I went back afterwards and asked the other 31 people, do you feel that your company does this? And every one of them lit up. Yes, that's exactly what we do. That is our purpose. That's why we exist. And again, mind you, we're trying to implement a PMO, but what we're trying to do is to get a PMO that is showing them that the projects they're doing are not to implement a CRM system or an accounting system or whatever it may be. It's to be able to provide safety to the single mother who is escaping an abusive relationship with 2 children, who's never been able to have been in a home of her own.
Yeah.
And when you think that you're executing projects to do that, now you're building a PMO around purpose, right? Giving the organization and the people a cause of why they want to go forward. And that's why, again, with purpose-driven PMO, we're able to see stickiness better than we have in kind of the business-minded traditional PMO that's out there. We're bringing the human element into the projects.
And if people could see us right now, they would know that none of us are millennials. But yes. I think it's even more true for millennials and the younger generations that they want that purpose, and they don't hesitate these days. They just swap jobs. I mean, they don't have. Our generation probably is also not that loyal, but they're even less loyal. I mean, a year in a company and maybe they move on. I don't know what kind of retention rates you have personally in your company.
Yeah, I think we're a little bit stronger than that, primarily just because I think we've tried to internalize within our company what we preach to our clients, right? What's our purpose, and give people a reason to want to stay with us and know, right? We sponsor and support veterans organizations because we want to give back to the community. We do this radio show because we want to give back to the project management community. We partner with the local PMI chapters because we want to give back to the community. So we're trying to internalize the purpose that we have, which is to empower people to deliver results. So we do that within our own organization as well, to empower them to know what is the result you're looking for, and we will empower you to do that. So we've had some pretty good success with that, I think.
And have you used any tools? I'm beginning to interview you here. Have you used any tools to assess the strengths in your team or their personality types? Because obviously that's the kind of thing that I'm also very interested in.
We haven't formally done that, and we probably should, especially after having done all these radio shows. I've been exposed to so many different ones, whether it's Roost Strength Finders or working with some of the emotional intelligence or change intelligence quotients that we've been exposed to. A lot of the different guests we've had on have their own programs, and they've had me take the test personally. So when I talk to them, I can speak with an educated mind. So your question makes me think what I should be doing a little bit better than I haven't. So note to self, utilize some of these tools within our team as well. I think that's a great suggestion.
And some of them, there are so many out there, and some of them are inexpensive or free. I mean, the DISC personality assessment, there are free versions, although with a little bit of just a small investment, you get people's profile. They get a report sent to them based on some questions, which is quite fascinating. On one of the leadership programs I'm running in Holland, we use a tool called Insights, which is a little bit more expensive, and it gives you a very extensive report. And I think that 95% of people who get a report, they say, "Oh my God, how could they write that? How did they know?" And we always ask them, did you show it to your spouse? Mostly it's their wives, because in construction, they're mostly men who take this test in the program. And yes, I showed it to my wife. What did she say? "It's so like you." It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable what we get from those results.
Yeah, absolutely. We did one. We had a guest on, I guess it was probably about 3-4 months ago. And I did that test, and it said, "Here's the type of person you are, or leader that you are." And I showed my wife, and she said, "I could have told you that without taking a test." But I didn't perceive myself to be that way, right? Even though she's reminded me many times. I think we go behave and work and in our projects and in our leadership in a way that we eventually become comfortable in, because that's kind of where we don't want to step outside of our normal box.
Mm-hmm.
But when we take these exams and we understand how others perceive us, it then takes us out of that comfort zone and gives us an opportunity to grow, right? Again, what I've learned from other guests is we don't grow when we're within our comfort. We grow when we step outside those comfort zones. And I think as project managers, what we need to understand, right, is that's not just for us, the PM, but for our team members.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
How do we take advantage of that?
Yeah. And also I would say the role of giving feedback, because I may feel very comfortable being in my comfort zone. Of course, we would be that. But am I conscious of it? Am I aware of what you just said? I grow better when I'm being stretched a little bit. To some people it's natural, but to others it's not. And oftentimes we need a bit of feedback about what other people see us doing well and where they feel that we can stretch, or the areas where they feel we could do with improving some aspects. I'm trying to be very gentle with my language here, because feedback always has to be delivered in a way that is constructive and not kind of, "Oh, you bad at doing presentations." I mean, people are going to be mortified.
Well, yeah, that takes me back to my master's degree in communication, right? How did I end up a project manager? I'm supposed to be a communications expert. But I shouldn't say always, because then I'm overgeneralizing again, but generally communication is a two-way street, right? It's somebody communicating and somebody receiving the communication. We communicate, the communicators usually fail to recognize the message we're sending as being received. And we're supposed to be communicating how it's being received, right? So we don't account for how the person's going to receive the message. And we think, well, that's just the person I am. Well, the way we should attack that is, who's the person receiving? And my message should change based on them, not them adjusting to the message I'm trying to send. And as project managers, right, I think that's something that again, why Ruth and others who have these evaluations to learn our team members, because when I have to give a message, it may be a consistent message to 5 different people, but if those 5 different people are receiving it differently, did I do my job communicating it?
Yeah, yeah. Which actually, the saying about treat people the way you want to be treated yourself, well, is that so true? It's better to say treat people the way they want to be treated, because you're quite right. Adaptive leadership is all about trying to understand. We can't fully understand others. Of course, we're not in their head, but trying to understand what's going on for them, trying to understand what's important to them. Some people like feedback very directly, and in some cultures are very direct. I worked with the Dutch a bit, and they're unbelievably direct. And other people, they needed to be much more gentle, and you just hint at something and they think that they're a disaster. So to those people, we need to be very clear on what they're doing amazingly well and just point out one area where we think they might improve. And so yes, we definitely need to adapt our styles. But also, I think it's for people themselves to ask for feedback. I don't know if you have formal feedback methods in your company, but I always encourage people to go out and ask just 3 questions. What should I continue to do? What should I stop doing? And what should I start doing? Because we've got to be able to hear the truth. And I don't mean that in a cruel way, because if you ask 10 people, you're going to get 10 different answers. But if we don't know how other people are perceiving us, how can we change anything? How can we? Yeah, I think it's vital to understand and get the feedback.
Well, yeah, I think back to early in my career when I was just starting out to become a leader. I was in a leadership development program, and the program at the end of each year, it was a 3-year program, and at the end of each year, you would get a 360 evaluation. The main thing that has stayed with me from that first evaluation was I was lacking in managerial courage. And I had always been, again, a successful employee, an athlete before. I never felt as if I ever had a problem with managerial courage, right? I didn't know what that meant at the time, but heck, I was willing to do anything. I was courageous. I could go run through a wall if you asked me to. But what I didn't know until I got the feedback is what managerial courage actually meant as a leader. And in those that feedback, which many could have taken to be negative, actually ended up probably helping me grow my career faster, because it helped me understand where my deficiencies were, and it was something that I could improve upon. Right? It didn't take much energy for me to, take it to the next level. But I wouldn't if if nobody gave me that feedback, I never would have known.
Oh, it makes me think of a very similar story. My, imagine I was on my journey. I was studying coaching. I think maybe I'd already finished, maybe I already got the diploma. I can't remember exactly. But it was year-end review, and my manager, who knew me quite well, he was giving me an evaluation. It was black and white. It's one of those from 1 to 5. And I think there were a number of different parameters. And one of them was obviously, are you delivering on time, or how good are you at certain things? But the one I remember that stood out, because they were all spot on, apart from one of them. And the one that had a very low grade was people management. And I got so angry at him. I'm like, you evaluate me great on all these project management skills, but my management skills, my people leadership skills, you've given a rock bottom grade. How can you do that? I was not in tears, but I was not happy. And he looked at me and he said, Susanne, you don't understand. You're doing so, you got the black belt and everything, but this is the area you need to focus on, and this is how I can get your attention.
Yeah.
And boy, did he succeed in getting my attention. So that was very effective.
Yeah, there's so much that we can learn when we listen, right? And when we get feedback from others. And that it makes me wonder, right, as a coach, what are some of the other topics that you get, right? What are the people come to you? What do they need improvement on? What can people benefit from in this informal radio interview coaching session that we have going on here?
So I think what's interesting is what people come with and present is not necessarily what the real issues are, because people rarely come and say, I have low self-esteem, or at least that's not what they present initially. So many people, unfortunately, suffer from imposter syndrome, and it plays out in their relationships with the teams, with stakeholders. They don't have strong boundaries around what they say yes to and what they say no to, because they're really worried about falling out with people. They're worried about not being good enough. So they overwork themselves, and to their detriment. And it is also one of the causes of stress. And it's a big cause of stress. And actually, there are certain personality types that really value the relationship rather than getting things done, who are very keen to please. It's not necessarily linked to low self-esteem, but sometimes they play themselves out in the same way. That's an interesting one. Oh, that's your dog there. I'm pleased we get some evidence of one of your 4 dogs.
Well, and I guess that's the benefit of coaching, right? Is when we think, or perhaps we don't think, we have something to improve upon, we may not be willing to admit that openly, but through the coaching and what you're able to do with these people, you help extract some of the benefits of that.
You know what? I have people, it's a very, very privileged position to be a coach. I have people share things with me that they haven't shared with many other people. I obviously hold that carefully. With coaching, it's amazing to see the differences, that the changes that happen in people's lives. Because the coaching I do, they may initially come with some project-related stuff, and most of the people I coach they're all project managers in one shape or form. They work in change management. They come with those issues, but that's never where it ends. It always becomes more holistic, because if they have difficulty setting boundaries or difficulty saying no, it will play out in all parts of their lives. And the other thing that often happens is in the coaching, it's relationship with stakeholders, relationships with team members. Why do my team members why don't they take responsibility? Why don't they do as I tell them, or whatever it is? And that's never the issue. The issue is always more, we hold up the mirror and we look at, well, what's happening inside of you? What are your own beliefs? Because oftentimes the external world is a mirror of the internal world, and it's fascinating. It's also very scary, because it means that whenever we point fingers and something isn't working, we've got to point the finger back at ourselves, not the finger, because there's so many people beating themselves up, but curiosity and looking at why is this happening? How come my team members are doing this or not doing that? How come I have bad relationships with all of my stakeholders? How come I'm being taken advantage of? Or people are taking advantage of me? How come? There are patterns.
Yeah, I early in my career, again, I think back, one piece of advice is someone said, whenever you point a finger at somebody, remember, you've got 3 pointing back at you.
Oh, I like that. That's very good.
So 3 times the effort that you're asking them to put in, you need to self-reflect and ask them why you're pointing at them. Ask yourself why you're pointing at somebody else. And again, all of these different, again, it was coaches and mentors have been so instrumental in my career. And that's just one of those tidbits I've picked up over time. But another one I've picked up is time management. And as I look at the clock, we're closing in here on an hour or so. Our show is winding up, and it went by so fast. So I guess a last question I have for you is, how can people get in touch with you? Anything else you want to share before we head out today? In these crazy times we're dealing with, obviously it's stressful, and you've provided some really great insight to everybody. If they want to reach you after the show and get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Yeah, I just want to say that I have an enormous amount of content. A person once said to me, "You've got too much content on your website." I'm like, how can that be? People don't want it, click away. But I've got short videos on YouTube, like 3-4 minute long. I've got webinars. There's a full hour-long webinar on stress management. It's all recorded, it's all available on YouTube with my name, Susanne.Madsen, SUSANNEMADSEN. That's kind of my handle on everything. Twitter @Susanne Madsen. My website, SusanneMadsen.com. But there's a lot on Twitter. I have also on my website, I have resources that are free. I used to have people register and they went onto a mailing list. You know what? I've deleted the whole mailing list because it was just, I don't know, people can just access all the resources on my website without even leaving their name. So that's my way of giving back. And then, of course, there is the book, which is now out in the second edition, The Power of Project Leadership. Yeah, I'm very proud of it because writing the second edition allowed me to put in all the stuff I've been working on for the last 5 years and all the good stuff we're using in our leadership program. So that's kind of, I think that answers your question.
Yes, well, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for the contributions that you're making to our industry. I think people who are working to help us as people are going to improve our profession more than textbooks on how to do processes the right way. Because after all, we are a people-driven profession. So thank you so much for what you're doing for all of us. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a treat to get to know you a little bit better. My ask, of course, is that you stay safe there in the UK. Hopefully get through this pandemic as quickly as we can for everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Joe, and likewise. And I really appreciate the conversation.
Well, thank you. Well, that's it. Thank you to our listeners. A reminder that these shows are recorded, so please be sure to subscribe to Project Management Office Hours, the podcast, which is available on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Spreaker, whatever your podcast platform of choice is. Thank you to our sponsors, the PMO Squad. Visit www.thepmosquad.com to learn more about all of their services. And that's it for now. Office hours are closed. Until next time, I'm PMO Joe, and you've been listening to Project Management Office Hours.